An old man sat on the cold concrete, right outside the Hamilton Financial Tower. His coat, torn at the elbows. His gray beard, tangled. But his eyes were soft and kind. He lifted his cup gently toward a man in a tailored suit. "Please, sir, anything you can spare." Richard Hamilton stopped walking. He turned slowly. "What did you just say to me?" The old man lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you. I just thought maybe." Richard stepped closer. His Italian leather shoes stopped inches from the beggar's knees. You thought what? That I would hand my money to a man who can't even wash his own face?" Richard lifted his steaming cup of coffee. The lid came off. "Let me give you something to remember." He poured the hot coffee directly onto the old man's outstretched hands. The beggar gasped. His fingers jerked. The paper cup fell from his grip. 2 pennies rolled into the gutter. "Get your diseased fingers away from me, before I have you arrested for breathing near my building." The old man's hands were trembling, blisters already forming on his red skin. Security guards rushed forward. "Mr. Hamilton, should we remove him?" Richard adjusted his tie. "Throw him across the street. If I see his face again, call the police." The guards grabbed the old man by his arms, dragged him away. His torn coat scraped against the pavement. He didn't fight back. He didn't say a word. He only looked over his shoulder, one last time, at the CEO walking through the glass doors, and a single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. His name was Joseph, 72 years old. No home, no family, at least none that knew he existed. A kind nun named Sister Evelyn knelt beside him in the shelter, holding a bowl of warm water. "Joseph, let me help you. Those burns need attention." He shook his head slowly. "It's nothing, sister. I've had worse." She looked at him with worried eyes. "You've been sleeping outside the Hamilton building for 3 years. Why do you always go back there? There are safer corners, warmer shelters." Joseph looked at a small photograph hidden inside his coat pocket. A picture of a baby boy, wrapped in a blue blanket. "Because that's where he is." Sister Evelyn paused. "Who?" Joseph's voice cracked. "My son, 40 years earlier. A small apartment. A young woman crying. A young Joseph, holding a newborn baby." Joseph had been poor his whole life. He worked 3 jobs. Construction in the morning, a factory at night, and deliveries on the weekends. His wife, Mary, was sick. The doctors said she had only months to live. When their son was born, Mary held the baby for 2 hours. Before she passed, Joseph was alone. He tried to raise the boy. He tried so hard. But the bills kept coming. The eviction notices. The debt collectors. One cold night, he sat on the floor of his empty apartment, holding his 6-month-old son. "I can't give you the life you deserve," he whispered. "But I know someone who can." He brought the baby to a wealthy family, distant relatives of Mary's. They had no children of their own. They agreed to adopt the boy. Joseph signed the papers and walked away. He never told them his name. He asked only one thing. "Please don't tell him about me. Let him believe he was always yours." Joseph kissed the baby's forehead, placed him into the arms of another woman, and walked away into the rain. For 40 years, Joseph watched from a distance. He saw Richard graduate high school. He stood in the back of the crowd at his college ceremony. He watched him build his company from a tiny office into a tower of glass. He never said a word. But 5 years ago, when Richard's company almost went bankrupt, Joseph did something no one knew. He had saved every penny from 40 years of odd jobs. Every dollar, every cent. He lived in shelters and on sidewalks. Not because he had to, but because he had given everything he had to one purpose. He made an anonymous investment of $50 million into Hamilton Financial. He saved his son's company, and Richard never knew. Joseph had spent his entire life sacrificing for a son who didn't even know he existed. But he had no idea that his greatest act of love was about to be repaid with cruelty by the very person he gave everything for. If you believe kindness should be rewarded, press the like button now. The next morning, Joseph walked slowly back toward the Hamilton Tower. His hands were bandaged. His steps were unsteady. He sat in his usual spot, across the street, beneath the awning of an old bookstore. He didn't beg. He just watched. He watched Richard walk in every morning, watched him leave every evening. Sometimes Richard looked stressed. Sometimes he smiled. And every time Joseph saw him smile, Joseph smiled too. But today was different. Richard was hosting a company celebration outside the building. A ribbon cutting for a new charity wing, named after himself. A stage. A podium. Reporters with cameras. Richard Hamilton standing at the microphone, smiling for the press. Hamilton Financial is proud to give back to this community, Richard announced. This is what leadership looks like. The crowd clapped. Joseph watched from across the street, a soft smile on his face, pride in his eyes. But then, a gust of wind blew Joseph's blanket into the street. He stood to grab it, and Richard saw him. Richard's face twisted with rage. His teeth clenched, his microphone still in hand. You again? Richard stepped off the stage. I told you yesterday. I don't want to see your face near my building. The reporters turned their cameras. Joseph raised his bandaged hands. I'm sorry. I was just sitting over there. I wasn't asking for anything. You're ruining my event. Richard stormed toward him. The crowd watched, in silence. Do you know how much I've invested in this city? Do you know how hard I've worked? And you sit there, like a stain on the sidewalk, reminding everyone of what failure looks like. Joseph's lips trembled, but he didn't look away. I'm not a failure. Richard laughed. Then what are you? Joseph's voice was steady. I'm a father. Richard froze for a moment, then scoffed. A father? Where's your family, old man? Where are your children? If you were any kind of father, you wouldn't be rotting on the street. He turned to the crowd. Someone call the police. This man is trespassing. 2 officers approached. Joseph didn't resist. He let them take him. But as they walked him away, he looked back at Richard, one final time. I forgive you. Richard's face twitched. He turned away. But those words, they echoed in his ears. 2 days later, Hamilton Financial Boardroom. Richard sat at the head of a long table. Board members lined both sides. A lawyer stood at the front, holding a folder. Mr. Hamilton, we have a serious issue. Richard leaned back in his chair. What now? The lawyer placed a document on the table. Your company's largest silent investor has withdrawn their entire stake. $50 million. Effective immediately. Richard's face went pale. That's impossible. Who is this investor? I've never even met them. The lawyer hesitated. That's the problem, sir. You have met him. A photograph appeared on the screen. A picture of Joseph, sitting on the sidewalk outside the Hamilton Tower. Richard stood up. His chair flew back. That's the beggar. His name is Joseph Whitmore. He's been your company's silent majority shareholder for the past 5 years. He made the investment anonymously, through a trust managed by Sister Evelyn at St. Catherine's Shelter. Richard's hands gripped the edge of the table. That's not possible. He's homeless. Another board member spoke. He's homeless by choice, Richard. He gave everything to this company. To you. The lawyer pressed another button. Security footage appeared on the screen. Richard pouring hot coffee on Joseph's hands. Richard screaming at him in front of reporters. The room was silent. This footage has already been shared with 3 major news networks. It airs tonight. Richard's legs gave out. He collapsed back into his chair. Who is he to me? The lawyer slid one final document across the table. An old adoption certificate. Richard's eyes scanned the page. Birth mother, Mary Whitmore. Birth father, Joseph Allen Whitmore. Adoptive parents, Margaret and Harold Hamilton. Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands shook. His eyes filled with tears. He's my father? The lawyer nodded slowly. He gave you up 40 years ago, so you could have a better life. And when your company was failing, he gave you everything he had left. He's been sleeping outside your building for 3 years, just to see you. Richard buried his face in his hands. His chest heaved. A sound escaped his throat, something between a cry and a scream. At that moment, Richard realized the truth. The man he had burned, humiliated, and thrown away was the man who had loved him the most. If this reveal shocked you, please subscribe to join our family for more stories like this. St. Catherine's Shelter. Richard stepped through the door, still wearing his suit. His face was swollen from crying. His tie was loose. Sister Evelyn met him at the entrance. "He's in the chapel." Richard walked slowly down the narrow hallway. His footsteps echoed against the walls. He pushed open the wooden door, and there, sitting alone in the front pew, was Joseph. His shoulders were bent. His hands were still bandaged. A single candle flickered beside him. Richard stepped forward. "Joseph?" The old man turned. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard fell to his knees. "I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know what you did for me." Joseph reached out with his burned hand and touched Richard's cheek. "You weren't supposed to know. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because you are my son." Richard broke. Tears poured down his face. He grabbed Joseph's hands, gently, carefully, and held them to his forehead. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Joseph smiled. A warm, peaceful smile. "I already forgave you. I forgave you the moment you were born." 3 months later, Richard resigned as CEO. He sold his penthouse and his sports cars. He donated half of his wealth to shelters across the city. But the thing he treasured most was the small house he bought on a quiet street. Joseph sat in a rocking chair on the porch, Richard beside him, handing him a cup of tea. Joseph didn't have much time left. The doctors said his heart was weak. But every morning, Richard sat with him. They talked about Mary, about the baby blanket, about all the years Joseph had watched from a distance. And one evening, as the sun set over the trees, Joseph looked at his son and said, "I never wanted to be rich. I never wanted to be remembered. I just wanted to see you happy." Richard held his father's hand. "You made me more than happy. You made me better." Joseph closed his eyes, and with a peaceful breath, he was gone. A gravestone under a willow tree. Fresh flowers lay beside it. The inscription read, "Joseph Allen Whitmore, a father who gave everything." Richard visited every Sunday. Sometimes he brought other people from the shelter, people he now helped. And every time someone asked him why he changed, he gave the same answer. "Because my father showed me what love really looks like. Not from a penthouse, not from a boardroom, but from a sidewalk, from silence, from sacrifice." Richard learned a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Money can build towers, but it cannot build a family. Pride can win applause, but it cannot win forgiveness. And the man you step over on the street may be the same man who gave you everything you have. Joseph spent 40 years loving a son who didn't know he existed. And even after being burned and humiliated, he still forgave him. What would you have done if you were in Richard's shoes? Would you have found your father in time? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below.